Hello, and welcome to a Bible study. If you need to, just pause, hit the pause button for just a moment, and go get your Bible. And let's talk about what the Bible says, and let's think about what God says through the Bible. The Bible is God's authority. Let's turn in our Bibles to 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 11. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 11. Paul is making the point about receiving material support in preaching the gospel. And he says that God ordained that those who preach the gospel should live with the gospel. But he makes this point, verse 11, if we have sown spiritual things for you, is it a great thing if we reap your material things? In other words, spiritual things are so important, far more important than material things. So don't undervalue the strength and value of the gospel of Christ. It's the power of God unto salvation. Saving souls is far more important than feeding the body or any other material thing. So we need to have the right value system. The value system means that we believe that sowing spiritual things, that is broadcasting, throwing out the truth of the gospel so that people can hear it, or so that we can hear it and benefit from the value of it. He says, is it a great thing if we sow to you spiritual things that we reap your material things? Now, don't get sidetracked. The point that we're making here is that material things are not nearly as important as spiritual things, and they're not nearly as valuable. Consider with me 1 Timothy chapter 4. 1 Timothy chapter 4, he makes this observation to Timothy. Paul makes this point. If you, 1 Timothy 4, verse 8, you get there. For bodily exercise profits a little. It profits a little. But get this, but godliness with contentment is great gain. He makes that point in chapter 6, verse 6. But godliness is profitable for all things. Godliness is more profitable than bodily exercise. And a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on bodily exercise, but he says godliness is far more important than bodily exercise. He says because godliness has promise of the life that now is. In other words, you get the best quality life if godliness is in place first, and the life that is to come. Now, if you just merely do things for the body, exercise the body, and get in shape, all you're doing is for a temporal body. We're going to die regardless of how much exercise you do. And if you die unprepared, what good was that bodily exercise? It has little value in comparison to the eternal value of the soul. Now consider Jesus' statement in Matthew 16, verse 26. Remember Jesus saying, for what is a man profited if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? If you could possibly gain the whole world, and yet we strive so hard sometimes to acquire the material, and we're going to die and not be ready to meet God. What did it profit you if you gain the whole world and lose your own soul? Jesus is trying to get us to understand that there are spiritual things that are far more important than material things. What would you give in exchange for your soul? What price would you put on saving the soul? And that becomes clear by how much time and energy we spend on one versus the other. It might be that we're spending all of our time trying to acquire material things and we lose our own soul. That would be very, very sad. What price would you put on the soul? And remember John saying this in 1 John chapter 2. He says, do not love the world. That's 1 John 2, verse 15. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. As you put all of your emphasis on material things, forget about who put you here and why he put you here. You forget about loving him who gives you life, gives you breath. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world, and the world is passing away. The world is going to pass away. The only thing that will stand forever is your soul. And we need to be people, he says here, whoever does the will of God abides forever. What price would you put on your soul? Even the earth is passing away, and we need to recognize material things are not nearly as important as the spiritual things. Spiritual things have eternal value. Now let's turn to John chapter 6. In John chapter 6, verse 27, Jesus said, do not labor for the food which perishes. That is, don't put all your energy, don't invest yourself so much in the material things like food for the body. All of that's temporary. Don't labor, put all your energy and effort into the laboring for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life. Put your energy into that because that's going to have lasting effect. Working for material things for the temporary is really foolish when you neglect the eternal things. Now, we have to keep up the body for sure. That's important, but it's not nearly, Jesus' point is, it's not nearly as important as the eternal things. Labor for the food that endures to everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you. Jesus gives something very, very valuable. Drop down to verse 32, where Jesus says, most assuredly, I say to you, Moses did not give you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. God sent Jesus here to give us the true bread. Feed on Jesus is the point. Learn all you can, absorb into your mind and heart all that you can about Jesus, because that's going to save your soul. Look at verse 50. He says, this is the bread which comes down from heaven, that one may eat of it and not die. You eat of Jesus, you're doing something of eternal. So work for that, labor for that, put your energy into that. In verse 51, I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he'll live forever. And the bread which I give is my flesh, which I give for the life of the world. Drop down to verse 55. My flesh is food indeed. My flesh really is food for your soul, food for you to eat, devour all you can about Jesus and his life that he lived in the flesh and the death that he died in the flesh was all to save your soul. And my blood is drink indeed. Drink it in. I'm not talking about physically. You can't physically do that, but you can drink it into your spirit, drink it into your soul, because those are the benefits that bring great lasting value to you for eternity. Then drop down to verse 63. It is the spirit who gives life. The flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life. So labor for that food, that true bread, not the temporary bread but the true bread. Labor, labor for the eternal things. He's comparing laboring for perishable things versus laboring for eternal things. Which is more important? Make sure you know what is important and that you're living because you know what is important. Some people are invested in material things only. And that reminds me of this story or parable Jesus spoke in Luke chapter 12, verse 15. He said to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of things he possesses." That's not living. That's not truly living. That's not what your life is all about, is getting more things, hoarding more things, having more things. And then getting to the end of your life and you have to give it all up. And then what's your soul? What's the soul condition like? What is the condition of your soul? So he says, you be careful, don't get pulled in and trapped in covetousness, material things. He said to them, take heed and beware. And then he spoke this parable to them, verse 16. The ground of a certain man yielded plentifully, and he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I'll do this. I'll pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I'll say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be of which you have provided? Think about what Jesus is saying. Your soul could be required this night. You don't know. James says life is a vapor. It's uncertain as to when we will give up this life. But he says your soul will be required of you this night. And that rich man had invested nothing in his spiritual life. Verse 21, so is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Now remember, Jesus says it's true bread. You need to labor for that bread. There are true riches, and you need to labor for those riches. Don't be like the foolish man who just counted on the material things of this world. Spiritual things have eternal value. Be sure you know the true value of spiritual things that are provided in Jesus Christ, and that you're invested in devouring all of those things. You need to obey the gospel of Jesus Christ today, and we can help you. Please contact us. We'll make arrangements for your baptism into Christ. Whatever your needs are, please contact us. You can contact us through www.airport-church-of-christ.com. We'd be happy to help you in any way that would be valuable to your soul, in the salvation of your soul. And God bless you in your study of the scriptures.